I'm not very good at intros, I'll be honest. I'm really bad at it, and I don't have like a concrete one. I don't know, I don't like having a consistent intro. It feels weird.
Yeah.
But, hello! Welcome back to The Thing. My name is Nolan, and I'm joined today with,
So I'm Steve.
This is Steve.
Your dungeon master has placed you in a dreadfully precarious position. You're playing the most phenomenal game ever created. Your skin grows cold from your first glimpse of the enormous beast. It's a product of your imagination.
He's the dude that we've talked about once or twice. When me and Brenda were talking about like D&D stuff, I guess. Steve, you're the dude that what DMs our games usually.
I am the DM that DMs.
What is a DM, Steve? What does that mean?
Could be DM. You could also interchange. People use GM, stands for Dungeon Master or Game Master. It's just the person that runs it.
I never actually knew what GM stood for.
Really?
No, I never asked. I never looked it up. I was just like, all right.
Yeah. So DM is D&D specific. Most other games use GM because it's, there's a lot of other games that don't use dungeons. So.
Oh yeah. We mostly play D&D though, and how long have we been playing D&D together now?
Like 3 years.
Is it really 3 years
Yeah.
though? It's like, it feels like almost like, I thought it was like 4 years the other day, and it like kind of took me aback. 3 years, I feel a little less old, so that's good. If you had to summarize like our campaign, Steve, what is our campaign kind of like?
That's a good question. I have not really considered that. I feel like our campaign is it's very much like an unlikely heroes scenario. Like you're kind of just a bunch of, in various ways, you're just a bunch of like broken individuals that ended up at the same bar together and are probably going to end up saving the world at some point.
Probably. Or dying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think we'll die? Do you think you'd kill us off?
I'm not trying to kill you guys off. I feel like my job is to make it as challenging as possible to get you guys as close to death and reasonably afraid that dying is possible, but not actually kill you. Yeah. Although in that, death is always a possibility when you run it that way.
That's true. We've tried a couple of times to die. We've gotten close. Mm-hmm. I think our latest endeavor of jumping in front of a dragon because we thought it would look cool probably wasn't very wise of us.
Yeah, but it did look cool.
Admittedly, it did look really cool, but we also got like fried to a crisp. But we lived. We made it back. Well, one of us died, but like she came back, so it's all good. I don't know, Steve. You're like a D&D guy. You're like more of a D&D nerd than I probably will ever be, just because I have a very bad memory when it comes to remembering like rules and specific spells and whatnot from books. When you're like DMing a game and you're getting all prepped, how do you usually start to do prep?
So I am not consistent with my prep. I don't always prep the same way. I don't do things in like a specific order. A lot of it depends on where we leave the last session off and how much I've already got planned for the next session. So sometimes it's super easy because I prep a lot and then you guys end up not really getting that far into what I have prepped. So most of it's ready to go for next time, which is fine. It actually allows me a lot of opportunities to like go in and adjust stuff based on what you do to match where we're going. But a lot of it is just trying to figure out what are the main like encounters, what are the main situations that you guys are probably going to be in, or like I think is going to happen based on the direction that you're going. Yeah. And then they prep a lot of NPCs, and then I also try to, depending on the circumstances, flesh out cities and stuff. Like if you're going to a major city, or like especially for the last several sessions, being in your character's hometown, there was a lot of prep on building out the city, and actually much less prep on planning the encounters and planning what you guys were doing, because running combat is sort of the easy part. building out the city took the longest.
I was actually going to ask you, like, what you do when you're building a setting like that. Like, do you start... The way I do it usually is I'll start with, like, the hub area, which is usually, like, a tavern or, like, a train station or wherever they're going to, like, start out, you know? And then I'll kind of, like, think of I'll think of, like, the characters in there, and then based on them, kind of, like, the places they can go. How do you kind of, like, expand out? Where do you, like, start with a setting like that? Because the place that we're at now, Sleeth, for context, is my character's hometown. It's like a little, like, river community that's getting, like, raided right now. My poor character, Kickflip, his town is being raided and people are getting murdered.
So, I guess the way that I usually do it is I sort of do it almost in reverse of the way that you do it.
Oh, really?
Is I'll have a, you know, like a general idea of the layout of the city. So I had a rough layout for Sleeth. I mean, I knew that the river ran through it. I knew that we had the city sort of split with half on the north side of the river, half on the south side of the river. Mm-hmm. And then I start with populating it. I start with NPCs, and then from there build out, like, well, these people live here, what do they do? So the ones that run stores, well, then I have a store that exists in the city because they run it. The ones that I think run, like, inns and taverns, that's the way that I build it out, is it's usually NPCs. And in your case, it was actually really helpful because you gave me a lot to work with when we were building out your family and the people that still work there. So it was just building out these connections of, like, okay, I know your mom and I know all your sisters, and here's all the stuff that they do, and then who are they connected to? And it is just this, like, reverse relationship building. And then once you have all the NPCs, then what do they do? And that naturally builds locations.
It's kind of an organic process, isn't it? There's not really, like, one set way of doing it. I know at one point, though, you had mentioned you kind of wanted to do, like, YouTube videos talking about, like, DMing and, like, doing Dungeons and Dragons, you know?
Yeah.
And you wanted to get more into, like, the specifics of how to actually do things, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because you were explaining it to me as people will tell you what to do, but not how to do it when it comes to it. And that sounds kind of, like, hard to me, just because, like for me, it's an organic process, definitely. It's never exactly, like, I'm going to start with this, and then I'll make characters around it, or I'm going to start with characters and build a setting around it. It's kind of like, I'll get one idea, and then everything kind of, like, devolves into madness around it, you know?
Yeah.
What kind of YouTube videos would you make about this? I'm curious.
So, I started before we started playing, in the lead up to me DMing. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos, reading a lot of advice and sort of stuff online about how to get into DMing, how to run a game, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was so much advice that was centered around, like, oh, just do it. Like, oh, how do you build if you're homebrewing a campaign, if you're developing your own adventure or your own city, how do you do that? And so much of the advice was just this generalized, like, oh, it's easy, you build a city, you build NPCs, oh, you build a villain. Like, okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that'll give you, like, specific ways that they think it should be done, but I think personally, I think the best thing is just giving people, like, here's the different ways you can do it. Here's the actual avenues you have for building a city, because you and I do it very differently, and they're both equally as valid methods of building a city or building out, like, populations of people.
Yeah. And I like that idea of giving them, like, multiple avenues to take, because there's not exactly one way that, like, works 100% of the time, you know?
Yeah. And again, using our campaign as an example, it's been a lot of trial and error on my part, because we started our game not with the intent of running, like, a long-term campaign. My original plan was I was going to run a bunch of one-shots linked together in sort of like a smaller mini campaign to get you guys to level 5, and then once we were comfortable with it, it was going to be like, okay, we're going to retire these characters and start a whole new thing from scratch. But then we got closer to level 5, and you guys were like, well, we don't want to stop playing as these characters.
We like these maniacs, yeah.
So I took the adventure that I wanted to run originally with all new characters, and I sort of had to retrofit your characters into it. And there's a lot of advice about running pre-written campaigns, and this is where I ran into this wall of like all of the advice boils down to, oh, you take the pre-written campaign and then you just customize it.
Yeah.
How do you customize a thing? Like, how do you customize this campaign that's already written?
Yeah.
And there's zero. I feel like there was very few legitimate explanations on how do you do that. Most of it was people were like, oh yeah, you just do it.
And I feel like a lot of that kind of comes down to personal taste when it comes to actually doing the customization. In my opinion, at least. What is your opinion on that? Like, if you were to customize a campaign, what types of things do you like versus dislike, I guess? What do you change usually? I don't know.
So I have a thing about the names that they use in D&D in like published adventures.
Yeah.
I hate most of the names as written in these adventures.
Sure.
Because half the time they're unpronounceable, and the other.
They got a thing with like putting apostrophes in names when they don't need to be there.
Or there'll be names like extra, getting like super specific here. An extra irritating thing for me is dragon names. I want a dragon to have a cool name.
Yeah.
I want it to sound intimidating.
It needs to have like an X in there somewhere.
Yeah, and to give me a dragon name that's like 9 syllables and unpronounceable because it's mostly consonants, like I don't want that as a dragon name.
What was the name of the dude we just fought was a half dragon, and you just called him Cyan Wrath.
Yes.
But he has like a longer name, doesn't he?
Yes, in the adventure as written, he has a first name and last name, and his full name is Langdradosa Cyanrath.
And I think we just ended up calling him Saran Wrath the whole time.
Yeah.
We're not very respectful to these characters most of the time.
No, and that messed me up because for the rest of that session, I kept calling him either Saran Wrap or Cyan Wrap.
Yeah.
And I kept blending them together.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
So yeah, names are a thing though that I am very, I guess, specific about. So that's one of the first things that I'll do is I'll gut the characters that exist in the pre-written campaigns, and I will rewrite them with new names, sort of new characters to match what I think makes most sense with your characters and your history and the information that I know about you guys, so that it's not some random person coming in and being like, you know, like, oh, I need help, I don't know who you guys are, but this horrible thing is happening to me, will you help me? It's a friend, it's a family member, it's somebody that knows someone that you know.
It's Dahlia Bunce.
Yeah.
It's Cosgrove Stubbins, the mayor.
Yeah.
We love him. He's got a good mustache.
Yeah, Cosgrove Stubbins, who knows your mom.
Might be my dad. I don't know.
Or having Prince Tobias pop up at the end and being like, hey, I'm here, also I need your help.
Yeah.
Way more effective to get you guys to want to do the things, as opposed to, as written in the adventure, it's literally just like some random wandering monk who's like, I happen to be nearby.
Ooh, my name is Smelbior Elberlord. Like some name that's like so generic. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Like, I know that I definitely play like a goofy character all the time, but I definitely, as someone that already spends a lot of time in Fantasyland, I definitely get very attached to these recurring characters. So to have Tobias show up again, it's like, yeah!
Well,
yay!
And so characters and NPCs, that's like one of the first things that I gut and figure out how to change when I am customizing a pre-written adventure. A lot of times I'll leave the like heavy kind of framework or the heavy backbone of the story, I'll leave that where it is and sort of build upon it and figure out ways to, based on conversations with you guys as the players, how do I take your history, how do I take your information that you give me about your character, your families, where you grew up, and how do I place that in the campaign in a way that makes it meaningful.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, is like, if you're gonna be customizing a campaign, you kind of remove everything that's not essential. You just keep that, like, that core narrative and make, like, the plot points, and you kind of build around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that you guys, the work that you put into your history and your backstory, it makes appearances in the game, that it shows up. Like, we built your hometown into the game so that you guys could go to Sleeth as an option and see your family. You know, for one of the other characters, for Kepri, we went to the sort of the home forest that she was from and went to a place where people knew her, so that we can see what happens. And for the other players in the game, I've been trying to build out their home cities and their backstories so that when we get to that point, you guys can go there and experience kind of the aftermath of their backstory and history as well.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to set it up to where, and I was thinking about this the other day, I don't want to set it up to where you come to me with, like, this awesome backstory, and I'm like, that's cool, your home city's not on the map, we're never going to go there.
You're like, that's not canon as far as we're concerned. Like, it just doesn't matter. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that you include things like that. And that's definitely the philosophy that I've kind of taken after when it comes to, like, DMing my own game. Because I started my game, for whoever's listening, I play a campaign with James, Marlon, Joe, and our buddy Dan, which James and Marlon have been on this before. And I started it after we'd started ours. But yeah, I definitely take after that when it comes to, like, building stuff. Because, like, who cares if Marlon wants his backstory to be that he's, like, a slime farmer from Louisiana? Like, let him have his fun, whatever. Like, he can control that aspect of it, you know?
Well, and then it gives you, as a DM, it gives you interesting stuff to work with that's sort of pre-built for you, because now you have this weird history of, like, if we go to Louisiana, there's slime farmers in Louisiana.
What is a slime farmer?
What does that mean? What is that? How does that, like, ripple out through the bizarre lore that's being developed for your game?
Admittedly, I still don't know what a slime farmer is. I hadn't planned that, but next time they go to a grocery store, there's gonna be, like, little canned slime, and I don't know what they can do with it, but they're gonna find it somewhere.
Well, yeah, or you can, I mean, I think one of the other options too that I think would be funny is, you know, you may not necessarily see it in, like, a grocery store, but if they end up in a dungeon and they're farming slime to, like, sell to people to put in and, like, trap their dungeon.
The slime market.
Yeah.
The slime black market.
Like an underground slime market where you're in a dungeon and he's like, hey, I know these slimes. Like, I'm familiar with these slimes.
I've sold these. These are mine. Like, the illegal slime trade. It's a very highly illegal. It's very illegal, but it's an essential part of the economy, really. Do you have a favorite part of doing prep? Is there, like, a favorite? Like, do you enjoy, like, world building more, or, like, characters, or, like, anything in particular that you enjoy the most about it?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that, like, really stands out. I just, when something comes up that, like, gets me really excited, I'll just dive into it. So, like, creating, when we were going to Sleeth and you guys split the party and I had to come up with NPCs for the people who were not in that session to play so that everyone could participate, I had a great time with that because I was building these characters and then it was this sort of, again, immediate outward effect of, I created this character, okay, where are they from, what are they doing here, and then it managed to spill out into, like, a lot of weird extraneous lore that will come up later and help me with world building. And then prepping out parts of the story and a lot of the historical stuff that's going to come up later and the way that it impacts other events and, like, things going on in other cities, I think is usually really, really cool.
Yeah.
So it all connects, and I think it's just whatever in the moment comes up that I'm like, oh, I can connect this to like 15 things at once.
It's like when you find that puzzle piece that finally like connects these loose narratives, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. That's kind of my favorite part too. Like finding the perfect character or lore bit or whatever to connect the story is always like the most fun part. When you can finally see things coming together and they're not just like little loose ideas anymore, or not as loose. I definitely get that.
Well, and like I think you said a little bit earlier, you do one thing and it cascades, and that was how we got to Tobias coming back in our game.
Oh yeah.
It started with me creating the NPCs Danilo and Camille, because it was this like long winding connection of, okay, I need these 2 random NPCs, so I made them, and then where are they from? Oh, they're from the Magical Academy nearby, and why are they there? Oh, they're there because of this professor who is the dude that Tobias was studying under, and he's in the city, so Tobias is with him, and it was this like, just complete spiral of, I think I was at work, not doing work. I was just like, power writing how all of these things connected.
Yeah.
Purely out of creating these 2 random NPCs and needing to put them somewhere.
Yeah, and it ended with Tobias coming back somehow. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's nice.
Survival depends on a quick, decisive move. Your choices are limited. Stand and fight, or run.
Do you have a favorite character in our campaign, Steve? And in the campaign we've been working on for like 3 years now.
So, yes, in the one that we've been playing in.
You don't have to pick the player characters. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But
so I love,
especially if it's gonna break my heart. You know, if you don't pick Kickflip, it's whatever.
No, I love all 4 of the players. I love your guys' characters. I think they're all awesome.
They are. I love them.
I think some of my favorite characters on my end, like the NPCs, are things stuff where I didn't really have a lot of stuff planned. It sort of just popped up in the moment and ended up being really, really fun to play. Like the weird, when you guys were in the Shadowfell at that weird Shadowfell market, and you met the guy that ran the like booth that had all of the monster eggs when you were trying to haggle over buying a like sea monster egg.
Which was surprisingly cheap considering its size.
Yeah, but it was like, that was fun just because I like in the moment it just sort of happened and came out, and I really enjoyed playing this bizarre egg merchant in the Shadowfell.
They had like an egg cooking mini game for a little while there.
Yeah, and just your weird interactions that spun out of it that like were so bizarre but came out so naturally, of like you guys drawing Vecna with no dick, and he was like, oh, that's hilarious, I need to show that to my brother. Like, it was the weirdest like 20 minutes of game that we played, and I loved playing that guy.
That was fun.
And then also I really like your sisters, the youngest of your sisters playing Pop Shove It.
Pop Shove It, my youngest sister, yeah.
Because it's just a thing that came out. I didn't really have like ideas going into it of what their personalities were like. I was just like, these are the history, these are the things that they're doing that we're aware of.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, while we were playing the game, we got there and my brain was just like, oh, she's like Kickflip. When we started, she's like an adult, but she has the personality of like a weird teenager. So I absolutely enjoyed that, because it was basically, she's just like, everything is cool, and she's like, what have you been doing? And I'm doing this, and it's super cool. And oh, you have a knife? Can I start swinging it around? Like, it is like a teenager with no rails on.
Yeah, that kind of came about for my character Kickflip just because I kind of was. I'll be honest, I was not taking it super seriously when we started. Hence the name Kickflip. Flip is his last name also. Yeah, our player characters for some context, are me, I'm Kickflip, I'm a gnome paladin who's looking for his father that disappeared while buying cigarettes. We have Kepri, who's not a dark elf, what is the...
She's a wood elf.
It's a wood elf, yeah. She just has very, very pale skin. But yeah, she's like the barbarian. She's fucking crazy. She robs people. She twists things in half. She likes to pull out spines. She has a big axe. We got Oriana, who's like the tiefling kind of magic caster of the group, who's from like a weird like Malfoy family.
Yeah, like religious cult family.
Weird like Nazi elf family, or not an elf, sorry, tiefling. And then there's Thea, who's like the traumatized one that's like the hunter of the group, who has a cool wolf. She's the one that steals from me the least, I think, so...
Yeah, she definitely...
So I like that about her.
But she encourages it in others the most.
Damn it, yeah, I just don't think I've seen her do that yet. I don't think Kickflip has caught on that she's, like, egging other people on to steal my money and hang me on the back of doors and, like, put me in drawers and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep. Short people problems. Do you have a favorite character from, like, one of your own campaigns, Steve? Or, like, a campaign that's not ours? It could be, like, a player character, like...
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So, It was not a D&D game, it was a Pathfinder game that did not last very long. Mm-hmm. And I know, Nolan, you and I have talked about this Pathfinder game before, because as a game, it did not go well.
Yeah, I know the one.
the DM in this particular game was very much hyper-controlling, would not let us do any of the things that we wanted to do because he had a story to tell and he was going to tell that story. So like I felt like our actions didn't really mean much. But the character that I came up for that game, I loved. He was a human male witch named Gideon Beaumont Beck, and his animal familiar was a skunk named Bradford. And I loved playing that character, and that honestly that was the only reason I hung on to that game as long as I did, was because I loved that character, and I loved the sort of backstory and the plan that I had for him. And I'm holding on to that because my hope is that at some point in the future I can sort of repurpose him and use him in one of our D&D games.
Yeah, just make him an NPC in our campaign. I've had like characters like that I'm really attached to that are in a campaign that that's just ended, you know? I was playing a game with like a couple family members where I was the homebrew race of Muppet Born, and you know this character, Glue. He was a little purple Muppet. It's got like a dark, like genocidal backstory. he's like, oh, my family's dead. My village got burned to the ground. And he's like always drinking and like flailing his arms around.
I loved hearing about Glue and like your plans for Glue.
I had an idea for my campaign. So my campaign is set in the 1970s for context. But it's like magical, like America, like George Washington is like an immortal wizard that like rules the United States. But I think I'm gonna bring Muppet Borns into it and have a thing where Jim Henson is like trying to create a new race of like Muppets that are sentient so that he can make movies and make money or something. Maybe a little disrespectful because I really like Jim Henson, but like also I think it would be funny to introduce Muppet Borns in some way.
Just exploiting this race of like created Muppet people.
I made you! I created you from felt! And they'll all rise up against him in the end.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Maybe I won't punish Jim Henson. Maybe I'll have them rise up against Michael Eisner or something after he buys the Muppets. We'll see. Because Michael Eisner probably deserves to be killed by Muppets.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in the context of your game, yeah, he absolutely deserves it.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. So, question for you.
Oh, yeah.
When you're doing, like, any sort of character creation, NPC creation or player character creation, what's your process?
Oh, my process? Sometimes I honestly just think of a funny name first. there's that website. It all kind of depends. If I'm like in the middle of a game and I need a character, like they're going into a shop and there's an NPC and I don't have one, I use the fastcharacter.com, I think, and I'll like think of a name on the fly that's funny to me and then click that. But usually if I'm like planning out a character, it all kind of depends on what's going on. Usually like the first stretch of my campaign was pretty goofy. There's Joe's character Momo is like gonna be in a boxing tournament and he's gotta fight this other like heavyweight. And so it was like, okay, what's like an intimidating, what would look intimidating? So I made him a were-tiger, and then the name Gavinus came to mind, and then his name is Gavinus Sneer, because Sneer sounds kind of like hoity-toity and kind of like uppity, like he's kind of like a more like, it's like an upper class, like probably has like the best trainers and like the best family, like he's got like money and all this stuff at his disposal. So that's how that came about. Other NPCs though are purely kind of based around what sounds funny or interesting in the moment. Like you'll have NPCs like oh god, what is his name? You'll have NPCs like Bill Fingal, who's a Triton, who came about purely because I wanted like a Waluigi type character to antagonize them and hunt them down as a bounty hunter. So Bill Fingal runs around and he'll like jump through walls and windows with a sword drawn and be like, it's Fingalin time, you know? And just be like ready to go. You'll have other characters. Oh god, I really cannot remember his name because I haven't ran into him in a while. You'll have other characters that are like more serious. Like there's a Dampier character, Tellum. His name's Tellum Gellum. That's right. A lot of my characters' names rhyme also because I think it's funny. But he's like more serious. He's got like the armor and he's got like a rapier and like he's got his like hair billowing in the wind. And he almost feels more out of place because he's like such a serious character with like a serious backstory in this campaign of a bunch of freaks named like Bashful Bruno. Like that's James's character's name. I just have no control over that. But yeah, usually when it comes to making a character, it is usually kind of joke based at first and then it becomes serious, which is something I think that you can relate to, which is if you try to make like a serious character, like there have been a couple of times where I've tried to make like a serious character and they become a total joke. Like Tellum Gellum. Tellum Gellum was supposed to be like more serious originally. He was just named Tellum at first, and he was meant to be like a serious antagonist. And he shows up, and he was actually supposed to be like helpful at first. He was going to team up with them and help them fight like the dungeon boss in their first like dungeon, because I was like, this might be like too much for him. First thing they do, they all gang up on him and they like disembowel him and steal his teeth and like strips of his flesh. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh my god! Yeah. So once he comes back to life, he's gonna be a little more fucked up, I guess. I don't know.
It is a tried and true thing that will occur where if you make a character that doesn't necessarily match the vibe. And usually it's like, oh, if everything's like fun and light and you're having a good time and you try to introduce a serious character with a serious thing, your players will clown on them immediately.
They will just beat the shit out of this guy. They will beat them down verbally, physically. Yeah. They do not care. They'll
make fun of their name. They will insult them incessantly. I mean, you guys did this with the teenage boy in the Shadowfell, Kale, for like 9 sessions. You guys just made fun of him constantly, never called him by the same name. And I'm trying to introduce this like character to help you guys make it through this like serious portion of the game, and you guys are just ragging on this like teenage boy the entire time.
He tried to steal from us. But of course we're gonna make fun of him. He's a little thief.
It happened. It's gonna happen regardless.
But by the end, we learned to love him, and we gave him a flaming skull candle as a present.
He still has that.
He still has that?
He still has that skull candle holder with candle.
That's probably a felony. He probably should not hang on to that, honestly. But then you'll have the opposite, where you'll make a goofy character, like my character Durg. He's probably like I go back and forth between him and Kickflip on if they're like my favorite character that I made or not. But like Durg was meant to be stupid and to kind of like be a joke character for the DM Tangi, because his full name is Durgagon of what is his full name? Of House Gonadonos, I think, and he's from the city of Ogapologos in like the prefecture of like Ganabagdo. He's got like this stupid long name, and his whole inception was I wanted Tangi to have to read this word every time because it would be super funny. And he was meant to be a joke. He's just like a Triton, and at first he was like so dark and brooding, and then like by the end of the campaign, not that it did get a proper ending, he became like the heart of the team, and like he like is all reformed, and he's like glad to have friends and not be like a weird like religious outcast or whatever anymore. Like it's weird how characters like that will grow on you to the point where like there were a couple times where like Durg or like Kickflip were like gonna die, and I was like legitimately upset. I was like, I don't want this dude to be dead. I like this character a lot, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's happening in my campaign right now with my players, because there's been a couple of times where they'll do something really stupid and they'll like, I don't know, jump in the way of a fireball or like push someone over to get out of the way, and then that person like almost dies, and I'm like, I'd feel really bad if Mad Muff the elf cat just like died and went to the afterlife and was gone forever, because this is poor Daniel's like first campaign, you know. I don't know, has that ever happened with any of your characters, like Kevin the Goblin or anything?
So, Kevin's one that I've been sitting on for a while. I have not been able to play as Kevin yet.
Played as Kevin, okay.
No, but I did in one of the other campaigns that I played in. That was the one where I played as the half-orc Donk.
Yeah, Donk. I love him.
Their
full name Donkey Kong.
No, Donk only. Donk only. He was a half-orc who was like sort of abandoned, and it was like I came in the middle of this other campaign, so I was like, I just need something that's gonna make enough sense that this character exists that nobody's gonna question it. And it was like a half-orc who was abandoned and taken in by this like religious order of like monks who helped raise him, and then when they realized that he may actually have these magical abilities and was like partially chosen by the deity that they worship, they got pissed off and kicked him out, which is why he was on his own, like trying to figure his own thing out, and then ran into the group and joined up. But there weren't a lot of opportunities in that game, like for people to die. Like it was sort of, we were way overpowered and the enemies were run in a way that like we pretty much wiped the floor with most combat encounters. Yeah. But there were a couple sessions near the end of that campaign where the DM really ramped it up, and it was in those moments where I was like, listen, if Donk doesn't survive this, I'm gonna be so angry. Because you just, if you enjoy playing them, you will become attached to them in ways that you don't realize until you're like, what do you mean I'm not going to be able to play this character anymore?
Yeah, and I think that could be the key to why that is. Like, if you have a character where every time you think of them, it brings a smile to your face because, you know, their name's Dildo Daggins or whatever, and they're from, like, the shore, and, you know, all this shit. Like, if it brings a smile to your face every time automatically, you're gonna get more endeared to them, I think. So with a character like Donk, just saying the name Donk makes me smile, you know? I'm thinking of this dude. And
he was just a big, nice idiot.
I love it. It's nice little characters like that. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Do you have like a favorite type of setting for campaigns? Like, do you like high fantasy, or do you like it kind of where we're at, where it's fantasy, but it's also pretty loose fantasy? Like, there's times where people will be like, oh yeah, I just went and saw the play Shrek 2. It's a famous play where I'm from. Like, I
think your description is correct. I love loose fantasy.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you can have more fun with it. If you're like, hey, we're playing like a high fantasy game, if everybody buys into it, that's fine. But if you're playing a high fantasy game, you have to abide by high fantasy rules. If you're playing a loose fantasy game, you can have those running jokes. You can build in weird stuff. Like, and even your game, the one that you run, even though it's more modern, I would consider that more of a loose fantasy as well. Definitely. Because you've got like slime farmers and you've got like were-tiger boxers.
And all kind of Bigfoot is in there somewhere. Yeah,
it just gives you so much more to work with in a way that you can genre mash and it's not gonna seem weird or out of place. And you could flip from like traditional fantasy swords and sorcery city and then go to the next city and that's a gothic horror city and not break any rules of immersion or genre. You can just do it and your players are like, yeah, okay.
And I like that. I like what I like personally in my campaign is everything seeming loose, but under the surface there is like one magic system that ties it all together. Like it doesn't seem like it all makes sense, but that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I have like a backstory figured out for mine that like connects everything in a way that I'm pretty satisfied with, but I can't say it on here because I think James listens to it.
Which, I mean, that's awesome though. Like, I like that you have that built in the background in a way that sort of, you're well aware of it because you built it to take up all this space behind the scenes, but like nobody else is aware of it yet until it's going to come through and like hit them hard.
Yeah. I think it'll definitely be interesting to get to that point if my players ever do. I guess.
Well, and one of the things that I do like about the sort of hard fantasy and different genres like that, like talking about Lord of the Rings, it's one of the things that I sort of draw on a little bit, like when creating characters and naming them. A lot of times if I'm dealing with elves, like I will tend to go towards more elvish sounding names. Like the names will flow a little more. Maybe I'll throw in some weird apostrophes to change the pronunciation.
Yeah.
But
7 apostrophes.
But it's fun to do that because then when you do break that rule, it can be hilarious. And you're just like, oh, it's this city full of with goblins. Like that's kind of how Kevin came about, where it's in the lore of D&D. You know, these goblins they're generally traditionally like evil, wild characters, and they've all got weird names that are like offensive, like you can have a goblin named Taint, and they'd be like, yeah, that's like an accurate goblin name. And then to have a goblin who's like, I consider myself a good guy, and I've taken on the name Kevin, which is like a normal human name.
Yeah.
You can do stuff like that, and your players will be like, I'm sorry, is that orc's name Dan?
That's Dan the orc.
Like, is it short for something crazy? Like, no, his name's Dan Thompson. He goes to work at a factory.
You're like, oh yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, short for Daniel. And it creates weird story moments where you have to explain like why, or your players have to come up with a reason. Like, why is that giant orc's name Daniel?
See, and I almost like that in settings like that. In a way, to me, that feels more real because with D&D, like, if you're just reading, like, the base textbooks, why are there this many subsects of, like, vaguely humanoid creatures? Why did orcs evolve? Why did dwarves evolve? Why are gnomes here? Why are there things that are just, like, barely different from each other, and there's, like, 5,000 of them, and they all live on Earth, and also there's a thriving population of, like, each and every one somehow, and they all... So if you're going to have a setting like that, it kind of makes sense that occasionally you get a dwarf or like an orc named Dan. I don't know, like that might just be like a human thing. Humans name each other Dan.
Yeah.
Whereas elves name each other like Legolas. But yeah, I don't know. I think that makes more sense in a way, because if it's like such a diverse world, then it would make sense that everyone has their own naming conventions or their own way of doing things.
That's one of the fun things about it is, okay, what are your... And especially once you start, like, gutting and renaming things or building your own world and coming up with names, like, what are your generalized naming conventions, and then how do you mess with that to keep it interesting, and you don't have, like, all dwarves have names that are, like, rock puns, because it's funny for a minute, and then after a while, you're like, yeah, what's his last name? Stonecutter? Yeah,
It's a Stonecutter,
like,
Quartz Stonecutter.
Yeah.
That's him.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a lot more fun. I was going to ask you a while back while we were on the topic. Can you describe Kevin the Goblin really quick?
Survival depends on a quick, decisive move. Your choices are limited. Stand and fight, or run. Use your lightning bolt.
To be continued.